announcements. It's awesome to see some of you. I've been coming to these meetings for a few months now and excited to pick it back up in the new year. And always grateful for meetings run by Lucia because she does a great job.
Mark Weller, co-director of California's Best Side Reform, and I was an organizer of this group for a little while, and since Lucia's taken over, it's taken up, so it's always great to see that. And I come here because this has been the center of the movement, of the Best Side Reform movement in the last several years. The Salinas and Watsonville branches have been fantastic, and also there's a new forming Greenfield group, and few people in the world could have pulled that off, and you're organized by one of them, so I'm always happy to visit this group. Thanks.
My name is Juan Martinez. I'm from Gonzales, representing South County, and been involved with this group for 35 years. Been called different things. I actually worked with CRLA back in the early 70s and for over 10 years, so involved with a lot of activities back in those days. And then we did a pesticide poisoning and for posting signs in the fields and stuff, so we're pretty active with this stuff. So we're, and you know, Mark calls me about 2 years ago, hey Juan, can you help? You and Bill Monty and all these guys did all this stuff. You know a lot of people, so I helped out, and we got a little bit going in King City and South County. She jumps in and just puts a whole bunch of fuel behind it and makes it what it is today. So yeah, it's definitely going forward. West introduced himself, and he's been supportive of us when we started up that second effort because of Mark and the California Pesticide Reform program throughout the state. So we're plugged in at the state level as a group. We're all plugged in. So anyway, that's me. Thank you.
Ana Barrera, I'm a teacher here in the Salinas area, and just part of Safe Ag, Safe Schools, supporting everything that you're doing, and appreciating all the hard work and dedication from everyone.
Hi, I'm Esther Mendez, and I'm a student at Alvarez, and I'm new to all of this.
Christy Toronto, and I'm SAS. I'm a parent and a concerned citizen in the community.
Mark Gomez, my first meeting. I'm a teacher at the Oz Middle School in Salinas, and I also teach at Cal State Monterey Bay, helping teachers become teachers. And back in the area, I went to school here a while back, but I'm recently transplanted from Los Angeles. Decided to go to social and environmental justice work here.
I'm Judy Terrace. I live in Monterey, I guess the other side of the lettuce divide, and I'm a substitute teacher with MPUSD and PGUSD. I am on the board of the Monterey Peace and Justice Center and a member of WILF, which is short for Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Monterey County Branch. I wish we had a short little name like Code Pink or Greenpeace, but just think WILF.
I'm Christina. I am a CSUMB intern, and this is my first meeting here.
I'm Carol Erickson. I've been with this group for some years, not as long as Juan. I'm a retired public health nurse and midwife, so I take this stuff very seriously.
Norma Lara, I'm a 6th grade teacher at Sherwood Elementary School and here as part of the Salinas Elementary Teachers Council.
My name is Lester Playavia. I'm a Hartnell student, and this is my few times I volunteered, so enjoy. I really like the new place where I live. So that's me.
My name's Anna Malari. I did my service learning with SAS last semester, and I wanted to continue. So.
Hi, I'm Mayra Sanchez, and I'm a PhD geography student at UC Davis, and I'm interested in how we care for these pesticides, so happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Cherise. I work here as a nurse in the community hospital, and I'm also grateful for this group and the work that's being done. Thank you for the food.
My name is Cassandra Palmetto, born and raised in Salinas. I go to school at MPC, and I don't know, maybe a year now at SAS?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is
is Tony. He's a student at Hartnell. And my name is, and Tony has been involved with us for a while. He has joined us in Sacramento a couple of times too. My name is Lucia Calderon. I'm the organizer of Safe Faculty Schools. There are a couple people that walked in after we started introductions, so I want them to introduce themselves. But first, just like some logistics, there are actually 2 restrooms right in here, so we can go straight to those. You don't have to go out and use the restroom. And then if you haven't eaten food, I think there's still plenty of burritos left. If they're unmarked, there's a napkin that shows what burrito is what.
And
Yeah.
melons.
And, oh, yes.
You pass those around, fresh melons and stuff, so it's like a little treat there for aftertaste kind of thing.
Okay. Well, do you think it'd be better if I put it on the counter so people could
Wherever,
just
yeah.
walk up and get it one? Thanks, Trace. All right. If you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, starting with Erica.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Erika Reola and I am an intern from CSUMB in SAS.
Hi everyone, my name is Juan Carlos Gonzalez and I am with Urban Arts Collaborative in Salinas.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Giselle Lazar. I'm a senior at Everett Alvarez, and I'm actually part of the Cosecha study, and I'm a Chamacos participant.
The what study?
The Cosecha study,
What is that?
it's Chamacos of Salinas. Chamacos of Salinas. Oh my God, I forgot the acronym. We're a organization here in Salinas where we collected data about how teenage girls are potentially exposed to pesticides.
Thank you. All right. We have a lot of awesome people in the room right now. So I'm excited. Okay, so the way that we usually do our agenda, just for folks who haven't been to a SAS meeting before, we like to review what has happened since we last met, what kind of education has gone on, what political pressure has gone on, and just in general, what's the news regarding pesticides. So we start really broad at the national, federal level. Sometimes we have international news too. And then we go down to the state. We are part of the Californians for Pesticide Reform Coalition, which is a statewide body advocating for pesticide reform. So we do engage in statewide campaigns. And then we go down to locally what's going on here in the Monterey Bay area. Sometimes we touch on Santa Cruz County issues because we do have a branch in Watsonville. And then we go into what are our next steps, how are we going to build on our victories, what new campaigns do we want to start, and we make commitments on what to do before the next meeting. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So in national news, there has been a study revealing the latest FDA data on pesticide residues on food. And the news was very troubling. So it showed a rise in the occurrence of pesticide residues detected on commonly consumed food. So this is pesticides that are left over on the outside of the fruit. And it actually, this article on page 2 lets us know that the 4th most prevalent pesticide found out of all the pesticides detected was chlorpyrifos. Which is a pesticide that we're currently working on right now, trying to get it banned in the state of California, or at least suspended, get its use suspended while the state of California continues to do studies. Even though the EPA scientists back in 2016 said that there was enough evidence warranting a federal ban of the chemical. Unfortunately, that got reversed after a new president came into office. Also, just some concerning news about pesticide residues in general. It found that roughly 82% of domestic fruits and 62% of domestic vegetables, so fruits and veggies produced here in the U.S., carry residues of pesticides. And that just more stats, 97% of apples, 83% of grapes, 60% of tomatoes, 57% of mushrooms, and 53% of plums carried residues. So some concerning news on how pesticides are going through the food chain and ending up on our food. And then another piece of concerning news at the federal level is that the EPA under Trump is possibly going to be rolling back on some worker protection standards through EPA, and they're reevaluating a rule that tightens safety standards for farm workers, which could make it legal for miners to work with what are known as restricted use pesticides. So these pesticides have been determined to be harmful to human health or to our water supply, etc. And so they have a special regulatory process, and miners are usually not allowed to apply that. But through this rollback on the worker protection standards, that might be the case again. And of course, this what people are saying is that this will lead to more people getting sick, more pesticide illness incidences occurring, because more people and young people and untrained people, etc., are having access to dangerous health-harming pesticides. All right, moving on to the state level. The DPR regulation for pesticide use near schools is now official. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in our good news after some disappointing federal news. But we'll talk about this a little bit more in the local section. But this is a regulation that SAS has been working on for years, since 2014. And really SAS played a very instrumental role in getting this policy implemented. And I'll talk more about it later, but it is official, which is extremely exciting, and there's a whole bunch of media starting on page 8 that SAS members are mentioned in that explain what the regulation is exactly and what needs to be improved about it. You know, it is a big success, but we aren't done yet. We're not done fighting yet. Also, some really amazing news since we last met in November. Chlorpyrifos was actually identified and is now, and will be listed as a Prop 65 developmental toxin. We were there in Sacramento when they surprisingly listed it as a developmental toxin under Prop 65, which is, I think, the Safe Drinking Water Act. Yes, okay. And that decision was made by the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, which is a branch of Cal EPA. The DPR, or Department of Pesticide Regulation, that makes regulations for pesticides, is a different branch of the Cal EPA, so they weren't involved in that decision. It was the public health body of Cal EPA that made this decision. And I mean, what was so significant about that event was that, you know, these are top scientists in the state telling us there is more than enough evidence to list this chemical as toxic to the development of children. So that was a good victory, and we had some SAS members there that spoke for public comment and just some SAS members that were there observing. I think it was a powerful day.
Is there anybody?
Yeah, does anyone
Who here was there?
Yeah, raise your hand.
Yeah, there was quite a group there, yes.
Any comments or parts that I missed?
Well, I think people might be interested to know that all of the panel are themselves scientists. EPA, that's not true, and the DPR, that's not true. And they all had specialists in the kind of things that pesticides affect. So when the Dow Chemical guy stood up to talk about, you know, you people just don't understand. We need this to grow food in this country. It was outvoted 8-0 in favor of this. It was quite a victory.
Juan
Let Christie go.
I was impressed with it too because the person who spoke on behalf of Chimacas was so good and I think swayed the argument in such a great way. And then at the end, the scientists, I got the sense that possibly they were talking about the science, but they were talking about it referring to mice. And then at the end, after everybody, I mean, that they were talking good science and it was pretty complicated, but it sounded almost like they were agreeing with Dow. And then afterwards, after Dow went up and said, you know, I don't think you guys understand, like Carol said, and they were talking to scientists, then the head of the AIDS said, well, you know, actually, mice aren't people. And that was so powerful. He said that mice aren't people, and when you test mice, you only test about 8 to 10 mice. but the Chumaco study was 600 women. And it was just overwhelming for me to see the solidarity behind the science. You know, that was so awesome.
I was going to say about the buffer zone, because you mentioned different things, right? And the only interest I had with that one is that, yes, it's a big victory. We did push for it. We did create a good community support and momentum to get it passed. And what upset me about it, the only thing that upset me about it, was that we wanted a mile, and we got a quarter mile. And that led to my deepening concern, because we had a quarter-mile buffer in the past. They took it away. Why did they take it away? We don't know. I'm assuming because no one ever applied it or used it. Because being involved with the pesticide posting regulation, the posting signs you see out there warning farm workers, they wanted to do that because now that there was posting signs, they realized, hey, well, no one's using them, no one's calling in, no one's complaining, no one's getting sick. Well, duh. It's like taking out stop sign because no one's crashing there anymore. Stupid, right? But this is what they did. They took away that quarter mile, and we got it back. But what it did for us, it energized us, energized the community, the awareness, and the opportunity that sets it before what we have now, which is the entire state. It's all positive. And now we can really start to get these school boards and other people, representatives, to start focusing on it, because it is a big deal. These kids are ADA, man. ADA is a big deal. Someone says, teachers might know, you're a teacher, $6,000 to $7,000. This is in Gonzales, because I have a project I want to start environmentally in Gonzales, and they're telling me $6,000 to $7,000 for 1 year for a student.
Per student.
Yeah, so if you get 10 kids sick, you know, I mean, 1 year that's 60,000. You start adding it up, and you know, it makes a lot of. And the issue we have down there is mosquitoes, and they want to start doing stuff with mosquitoes because it sits along a salute, and you get the water that sits, and then you know they irrigate the grass. And you got grammar school, junior high, and high school kids practicing and whatever, and all the mosquitoes come out to the grass because it's wet. And guess what? The kids go out there and play, and now boom, ADA goes. So the school board asked the city of Gonzales to do something about it. They put bats and housing for bats, and the bats flew away. But the positive, and always look at the positive, right? Like with this quarter mile. They reacted, the city reacted, they tried to do something. It failed, right? Which means we got their attention. Now the thing is, can we get them to take another step, right? And get that water to flow through that salute. Flow through it and take the mosquitoes with them, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's another conversation.
Lots of new news in that, yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what the school regs exactly are and what we've kind of all agreed upon in past meetings on how we want to improve upon them at the state and local level. But just for the flow of the agenda, I want to save that for the beginning of our local discussion. And so I think the next thing on the state agenda was page 24. We have, and Mark might have more updated information about this, but there is a bill currently in the assembly, I believe, that might end up increasing the fines for growers for violating pesticide regulation. And this is done by Assemblymember Quirk. It's AB 1419, and it will give the California DPR, Department of Pesticide Regulation, authority to issue $25,000 fines or more for serious violations, and before that number was only $5,000. What's the likelihood that this is going to go through? I know that the DPR is supporting it, but the Farm Bureau is against it. Do you have any updated information on how confident we're on?
It got out of its first committee, and we'll need another one before it goes to the floor. Again, this isn't going to necessarily improve health or anything like that. But right now, so everybody knows, if there's a violation, if they do some, if the applicator or grower does something illegal with pesticides, the maximum fine is $5,000
for the 2 incidents that happened last year, back to back,
Yeah.
they would just be for
$5,000.
per
Now,
individual or for that?
well, so there's some legal arguing over what does that mean. Should it be 5,000 for each person harmed, which is our position? And others say, no, it's 5,000 for one violation. Different attorneys and different ag commissioners interpret that differently. So we understand from the Department of Pesticide Regulation that their intent is that this would be $25,000 for each person harmed. That would be the maximum. So if there were 5 people harmed, that would be a $100,000 fine. And I don't know more about the possibilities of this getting through, but I know that it passed its first hurdle, and we do know that U.S. Farm Bureau is opposed to it, and oddly enough, some ag commissioners are opposed to it, even though this is all about them. It gives them the authority to fine more, basically, than they do now.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Next thing, so the Department of Pesticide Regulation, they also test for pesticide residues just in California, because they're a California agency. And they've also released residue reports for, I believe, 2016. And basically, just to give you an idea of how the DPR works with their media and their PR, they released this report and released a press release and said, you know, we don't have to worry about pesticides in California food. Little to no residues show up in our testing. But when you actually go and you look at the data, it tells a different story. And my understanding is that chlorpyrifos was the pesticide that was most found in pesticide residues.
At illegal levels.
And so there's a story there that they're not telling, and they indeed were very concerning. Go for it.
Would you mind? I just want to add one piece to this, because the headlines read, low to no pesticide residues on your food. That's what the DPR put out, and that's what all of the newspapers mimicked and all that. But let's just do some quick math on that. They found 4% of the produce they tested to have illegal levels of pesticides on it. So how many, on average then, how many pieces of fruit and veggies do we have to eat to get an illegal amount of pesticides on? If it's 4%, anybody know?
25.
So yep, you divide 100 by 4. It's right, it's 1 in every 25 pieces of fruit and vegetables, on average. So how long does it take us to eat? You know, you're supposed to eat 5 a day, right? So every 5 days, you're eating an illegal amount of pesticides on your food, and that's low to no. That sounds pretty high to me. I would be worried about that. 1 in 5. I mean, you know what? Yeah, pieces of 1 in 25 pieces of fruit and vegetables. So this is why we need to think about the math a little bit. When they say 4%, don't worry about it. That's 96% safe. No, that's
For mice.
so that's just my little math lesson of the day. I hope you don't mind. I know you have many of your teachers, especially have very long days already. But let me push a little bit. Yeah. Aaron?
Well, can you share that to us, please? The report you found, or whatever that was, the article? The DPR?
Yeah.
That number 4?
Yeah. Sorry, I'll link that in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because we had just talked about the FDA residue monitoring, and I know the USDA found even more than the FDA previously. Why is the DPR so much lower than the FDA and the USDA?
I think it's higher than the FDA and lower than the USDA, and the USDA also tested for grains and other things. That's a possible reason, but also remember, they're just in California, with all the fruit and vegetables out there, they tested less than 3,600 samples. That's basically what 2 people eat in a year. That's all they tested. That's it.
So the 4% number isn't the percentage that they detected residues, it's illegal levels of residues.
Illegal levels of residues,
okay.
Yes.
And their levels of tolerance are much higher
Yes.
than any environmental group. So
Would
it's a
say,
shame.
yeah.
Yeah, on page 3, it actually talks about how EPA and other agencies' safe, quote-unquote, safe levels are outdated and need to be changed. And that goes the same for DPR. Any other comments on that one? Okay, and then lastly on our state news, we have been doing a little bit of work on getting Roundup off of school campuses. Back at the end of 2016, the Pajaro Valley USD banned the use of Roundup on their campuses after teachers got together and said, hey, we're fighting against pesticide use around our schools, but while we're doing that, pesticides that are, known to be harmful are being used right on our campuses. So they got together, did a petition, and ended up getting the use of Roundup banned on their campuses. And then not too long after that, I think later in 2017, the Salinas City Elementary School District also banned Roundup use. So we want to keep that momentum going. But there is some news on the California level on Roundup because it was determined to be a Prop 65 carcinogen. So the same body that determined chlorpyrifos to be a developmental toxin ended up identifying glyphosate, or the main ingredient of the herbicide Roundup, as a carcinogen. And attorney generals from 11 states are fighting that ruling right now because they're from the Midwest, and they say, well, sometimes our products end up going into California, and if California has to label Roundup, then that means we have to label Roundup, and that's they're all up in arms about having to label it, so they'd rather not, let the public have their right to know about possible carcinogens that they're spraying. So I included 2 articles about this only because if you go to page 27, there's an op-ed by the head of the Center for Biological Diversity, but the next article on page 29, the scientist, or the lawmaker who actually created the Prop 65 ruling, he says that Proposition 65 is 30 years old, and for every one of those years there have been strenuous attempts to kill it on the ground, that it's different from other states. And he said they've always failed. So I thought that was very uplifting. Even though Monsanto's fighting this like crazy, and other states might be worried about it because they might also have to label it, it looks like it's going through, and that eventually in 2018, I believe, we will be seeing labels on Roundup containers saying that it has chemicals known to the state of California that cause cancer, which is really awesome, great to know stuff. All right, so now we're at the local level stuff, and I did want to overview very briefly where we are at now in terms of our school regulations, because they did just go into full effect January 1st, and what we have decided over past meetings that we want to focus on improving it at not only the state level, but what we can do at the local level to work on protections for school children. So what these Department of Pesticide Regulation rules call for is a 1/4 mile buffer zone. So from the edge of a school to out a 1/4 mile from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Some of the most drift-prone types of pesticide applications can't take place, and this also goes for daycares, state licensed daycares as well. And so this means there cannot be aerial applications, applications by plane or helicopter. They can't take place within a 1/4 mile of schools during these school hours on school days. Fumigations can't take place. Dust applications, because they're very prone to drifting, they can get picked up by the wind. Pesticides can be applied by sprinkler, and that is part of this rule. It cannot be applied by 1/4 mile. And another one that's really important is air blast. So that's the type of pesticide application where this like tractor machine thing that they drag behind them just bursts out pesticides in every direction. It's the way that they like apply pesticides in orchards or sometimes in vineyards also, just because it goes outwards and upwards and gets everything into the trees. And that's one of the main ways that chlorpyrifos and other organophosphate insecticides are applied as well. And also they put an extra rule on fumigations, because fumigations are especially drift prone. The pesticides are applied in a gaseous form, which just makes them even more volatile and ready to move away from the site of application at dangerous levels. So they created a 36-hour period between fumigant applications and whenever the school day or the school day starts or the daycare opens. So because they usually open, around 6 a.m. on Monday morning, if you go back 36 hours, that means that basically all of Sunday and maybe a little bit of Saturday night, or just all of Sunday, pesticides or fumigants won't be able to be applied within a quarter mile of schools, which basically just leaves Saturday for fumigations within a quarter mile. And then there's also a notification aspect of this rule. So besides the buffer zone and the 36-hour restraint for fumigations, schools will be notified. But it's just once a year. It's just one list that will basically tell the one school site administrator, well, I'll get to that in a little bit, but that's more complicated. But it's a list of all the pesticides that growers intend to apply for the next year period, within a quarter mile of that school. And the school should be receiving these by April 30th of every year. So if you work at a school on April 30th, someone at your school is going to have that list. What we are now finding out is that that list might only be accessible to one person per school site, but via a password-protected website. And so now we need to kind of think about, well, what are we going to do about that? Is there a state kind of rule that we can implement that will make it more accessible? Are we going to have to go on the ground at every school and build relationships and get that administrator's password, or help them implement some sort of way to spread this around to the public?
Is there anything in the ruling that's like gag order banning them from just publicly?
No. Yeah. There's nothing saying they can't spread it around. But what we're concerned about is we thought that all the teachers and the parents would be getting this as well, but now what we're learning is that this list is only going to one person per school site. Did I see Alisal? Or was it just Juan? Okay, Juan.
So just one thing. You could reverse engineer this thing, right? So like, for example, you look at all the crops that are growing in a specific area that's prone to drift, i.e. a school nearby. Then you look at what's being grown there, broccoli, lettuce, strawberries, whatever it is. They're all going to get sprayed a certain thing based on what they got. Fungicide, pesticide, herbicide, insecticide. So we know that. So given a certain kind of mite or bug that would eat a certain kind of crop, that's what you're going to, it's going to go there, because there's lettuce, bugs that just go for the lettuce. They don't go for strawberries or anything else. And they have to be fueling it with this toxic chemical. And I'm just saying, every time that there's a crop out there, we could very simply just get samples of what we know they're going to be spraying. It's going to be for the weeds, it's going to be for the fungus, it's going to be for one of the four, and we just keep our eyes out. We don't have to be trying to see who's that one person with it. We could reverse it the other way. It's obvious they're doing it. What are they doing? It's strawberries. They're none of them going to spray something that they shouldn't be on that particular crop. And if anybody here ever worked in ag, you guys ever sprayed or water? If you did, you know what I'm talking about. And everything's got its own stuff. So there's ways to work it, to push it back to the wall.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And if we knew beforehand, that would be a lot easier to do what you're saying. Is all we're saying. And since the information's already out there, we think we should have it. I think I'm interrupting the sound. I'm sorry.
The right to know. You're
I have a
right.
question. You said April what? April 30th. Yeah.
And you mentioned on the last one, so Saturdays is the spring. There's a small percentage of schools who have school on Saturdays. So then how would it affect those Saturday schools? Because not all the schools. I know like in my district alone, there's only like 2 or 3 schools that have Saturday programs, and most of the kids are bused to those schools. So how would it affect then the schools that do have Saturdays, since you mentioned it's only Saturday?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is a very important point. And so, for example, one thing that this rule was going to include that they took out was a 48-hour advance notification for every application that would happen within a quarter mile of schools. And we were so excited about that, because we know that in Santa Cruz County, because their ag commissioner made an agreement with growers, we don't even know how long ago, between growers and schools, they receive 5 days advance notification for fumigations. And there has been situations where the school receives a notification and they say, no, we have Saturday school on that day. And then they have the ability to communicate with the ag commissioner and ask him to work with the grower to reschedule that. That has happened. But if you're not getting that notification ahead of time, how are you going to know? And so that's a big part of this rule and what is missing from it. And so we want there to be a posting, because we know that, okay, if one school site administrator is going to be getting a list of them, and also the agricultural commissioners need to get permit requests ahead of time for these applications, at least 48 hours ahead of time, they have that information there. And they can very easily just post it on the website. Like, ideal situation is the ag commissioner would get it, post it on this publicly available website that everyone could just go to and see, okay, there's going to be a fumigation in 2 days from now, right next to Sherwood or right next to La Paz or whatever. And so that leads very, very well into what we want on top of these rules. Anna and then Christy, really quick.
So in the city areas right now with the legalization of marijuana, there's a lot of warehouses popping up in my own neighborhood of East Los Angeles, down in LA areas, and in urban sectors now. How would this affect the notification in terms of growers that are doing now warehouse growing of, they're using pesticides with the marijuana, notifying through the county ag in LA County, because this is something that when I was down for Christmas, I was observing all these warehouses popping up, and just kind of thinking about, wait a minute, are they going to notify, my former elementary down in East LA? Are they going to notify them when this is going to be sprayed, and hopefully pushing for maybe more organic, marijuana production within the city urban areas? But
I think that since it is a statewide regulation, this isn't only for Monterey County or Santa Cruz County. Since it is a statewide regulation, if they are doing a drift-prone pesticide application within a quarter mile, there will be the buffer and there will be that annual notification list. My understanding is that the greenhouse applications aren't subject to very much of a buffer. I think it's either 0 or 25 feet. But they will be subject to that notification. So maybe there is going to be some schools in East Los Angeles that end up getting this notification of these pesticides. They're like, there's no fields around me, but it might be because of the warehouse.
And I just quickly want to say, in the paper, the newspaper, there's air quality is rated every day. You see it in the newspaper, and it talks about the amount of pollutants, whether or not it's a high pollen time or whatever. And I think that should be part and parcel with these massive amounts of chemicals being sprayed into the air.
Yeah, thanks. Was there one more comment? Yep.
I want to know are the farmers supposed to, how do I rephrase the question? How they're supposed to notify the schools and whatnot. What about those independent farms? Where are they supposed to send out notifications to, just in case they have, we're spraying too, do they have to do that? Does that law apply to them too, or is it just the big ones?
Well, the county ag commissioner is kind of the liaison in this situation. So all farms that are applying restricted use pesticides need to be sending their permit applications to use those chemicals to the ag commissioner. So anyone, not just like Dole or Giant Berry or the big ones, but anybody who's using these restricted pesticides.
Is there a way to check that? I mean, it's easy to just, hey, we're just going to send you, but we're still going to do it. That type of thing, so. Well, I don't know, I'm just, worst case scenario, just.
Yeah, interesting. I don't think I understood your
No,
question.
if I could answer, most growers do, especially if they're smaller, do not spray their own stuff anyway. They usually hire a contractor.
Yeah.
Those contractors are the ones that are responsible that have to report to
But
the ag
aren't the
commissioner.
farmers supposed to send the notification of part states by
So,
law?
yeah, so
Yes.
the
Yeah.
permit application that is sent to the ag commissioner's office has the grower's information and has the pesticide applicator's information, and they are expected to be making that communication and sending that to the ag commissioner, yeah. So any restricted pesticide applications will be going to the ag commissioner. That will then be compiled into a list if they're within a quarter mile of schools and sent to that school. Yeah, Mark.
Just to quickly add something to Anna's question, there are new specific rules around what pesticides can be used on marijuana, on cannabis. And it's different from field applications. So you could check that too. They're supposed to be more stringent actually than on field applications. In fact, there are some pesticides they can't use, that they can use in fields, even next to schools, on cannabis, in greenhouses or anywhere. They have some new rules on that.
So there's rules on the cannabis as well as on greenhouses?
Yeah, I mean, I think the assumption is a lot of the cannabis will be grown in greenhouse. I'm not sure about that. Anyway,
Those regular
DPR
cannabis
has listed that. Sorry, the attorneys might know better than tonight, yes.
I was to say, most of the cannabis, at least in Monterey County, is going to be grown in greenhouses, and cannabis has tons of regulations on what they can and cannot spray on it. Just because they'll be synthesizing a lot of that down into an oil, and the part per million comes out way more if you have just a little bit of any kind of pesticides or any kind of chemical on it. It's exponentially grown in the final product. So there's strict regulations on that.
And as part of the law, supposedly all of the cannabis is going to be lab tested before it's sold. And so if it comes up that there are pesticide residues on the cannabis, they're supposed to be thrown out and not sold commercially. And so the idea, we don't know how it's going to play out, is that growers are going to be invested in making sure that pesticides, not only the ones that they might apply, but in neighboring fields potentially, aren't going to make it into their cannabis crop. But I think it's difficult to tell at this point what might be the reality of the situation.
I was just reading an article and something to add to that. What I was reading was most of the farmers that are sending their product to get lab tested are actually them themselves. They have their own lab. And this is just an article I read. It was like a few days ago. This is very interesting.
Because my concern is that there needs to be that notification, just like for the growers that are across the street from our school.
Yeah.
I think that will be part of it. Omar, really quick.
Yeah, just kind of hit on that. So most of them do have their own lab, but there are local independent labs. Just SE Labs, for example, is one of them. And to hit like kind of on your point as well, like I said, most of those crops, the cannabis crops, will be contained inside a greenhouse. So if they do fumigate, it's all really an intricate system. It's well contained, air quality and stuff. It's pretty automated.
What's to guarantee that there's going to be regulation of this? They're not regulating the chemicals that are going on the crops now. I mean, and tons are going on the crops now. And now we're talking about putting this on something that our kids are going to be breathing in and eating.
Yeah, apparently there's a list that DPR released that says these are the only chemicals that can be applied on marijuana. And I think that that's giving some people some hope. I'm going to wrap up this conversation because we have a lot to talk about for schools and what we're doing here in Monterey County. But one interesting fact is that in our Greenfield group, there is an organic cannabis grower who's been coming to our meetings, and he heard about it and he was like, yeah, I'm really concerned about pesticides from conventional marijuana warehouses coming in and contaminating mine. And so that's his skin in the game, which is pretty interesting. But I'm going to move on. So after January 1st, we have these school regulations that are in effect, and we're also working to get chlorpyrifos use suspended at the state level while state scientists look over all the science. So now that we have these things, yes, we are celebrating the school rules, but yes, there are also many, many improvements, like what happens if there's a Saturday of fumigation and there's a Saturday school and we don't know about it. So over the last couple of meetings, we've been formulating, what do we want to move forward in 2018, pushing for, and we came up with some things for our state level advocacy and also our county level advocacy. So at the state, of course, I've said it multiple times, we want to ban or at least suspend the use of chlorpyrifos while state scientists are looking over its health impacts. We also want money for 40-hour web postings of pesticide applications. So as I mentioned, growers that are applying restricted use chemicals or pesticide applicators are required to be submitting a permit application to the ag commissioners They have all that information, all that data collected. They could easily put it onto the websites. But of course what they say is, well, we don't have enough funding, we need to hire a full-time person and it will cost this many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So one idea that we've had is to advocate to the DPR to provide money for county ag commissioners to be making these 48-hour web postings. And in the meantime, we want to be working on getting these notifications that are happening as accessible to the public as possible. And also one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is T-Lone or 1,3-D. It is a fumigant pesticide that's used a lot in strawberry fields. Back in 2016, the DPR changed a lot of the rules for T-Lone, and it was what we call an underground regulation because they didn't consult the public and they made decisions that were against the suggestions of other Cali-PA bodies. And they basically made a new risk assessment for T-Lone saying, well, we thought that it was this dangerous, but actually now we know that it's less dangerous, and so more of it can be applied and more of it can be allowed in the air. And we're looking at an air monitor at Ohlone Elementary in Watsonville, which is in Monterey County, that has been registering around 0.1 to 0.14 ppb of T-Lone for the past 5-6 years. And the safe level used to be 0.14 parts per billion, and now all of a sudden the DPR is like, no, actually the safe level is 0.56, so all the levels that you've been seeing are totally safe. So that's another statewide thing that we want to work on and want to keep talking about. Any questions on state level work? Really quick questions or comments?
And just so everyone's clear, we have a lawsuit challenging the way DPR redefined the T-Loan risk. And it's going to have a hearing on February 2nd, by the way. You might be talking about that later.
I didn't know
or not.
that.
Yeah, there's going to be a court hearing in Alameda County on February 2nd.
When I get to upcoming
I'll bring it
events,
up
will you
again.
bring that back up first?
Yes, I will.
Okay, just real quick on the statewide. All these are organic growers of all types. Would it be nourishing a relationship with them where they could give us donations so we can keep the war effort going here? For a statewide effort, because all these organic guys, whether they're lettuce or marijuana, they're all concerned about the same thing, about drift onto their property. And if we could help them out, I'm sure they'll, because they need allies on this side as well, and on the environmental side because of their crop.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, okay, and now to the county level. So there are plenty of things that we can do at the county level to improve upon the school regulations and improve upon chlorpyrifos phos restrictions. So there is a pilot fumigant notification project going on in Monterey County. And unfortunately, it sounds a lot more widespread than it actually is. So as I mentioned, in Santa Cruz County, the Ag Commissioner has made an agreement with growers where they will notify all schools within a quarter mile of fumigant use when there's going to be fumigations. And the Pajaro Valley Unified School District has most of its schools in Santa Cruz County, but has 3 of its schools in Monterey County, and those schools weren't getting that 5-day notification because they fell under a different ag commissioner. And those teachers were like, hey, our friends over there are getting notified, but we're not. And those 3 schools are actually like the most surrounded by fields, which is pretty ironic. So they actually, over the course of like 2 years, were fighting and negotiating with the county ag commissioner, and SAS was a part of that. SAS was all behind them, and ended up getting the Monterey County Ag Commissioner, who now works for DPR, but at the time Eric Lordson was the Ag Commissioner. He ended up agreeing to grant that 5-day fumigant notification to those 3 Monterey County, Pajaro Valley USD schools. And that is what the pilot fumigation notification project is. And what we want to do is work with the new Ag Commissioner to be expanding this project, this notification, to all of county schools, probably starting in Salinas or wherever we have the most political capital, and starting there. So that is one of our big county goals for 2018 and beyond, to make sure that other schools are getting notified 5 days in advance for fumigations happening within a quarter mile. And then also, we want more pesticide protections near schools, in addition to quarter mile buffer zones from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. We also want 5-day notification within a quarter mile for all restricted pesticides, not just an annual list. We want bilingual online posting of pesticide notifications. We even want text alerts, making sure that people know when pesticide applications are happening near schools. And we talked about getting bigger warning signs. So right now at schools, they do have to notify, like when there's going to be a pesticide application nearby. Wait, no, they don't. I don't think they actually need to notify, but at some schools, like in Santa Cruz County, they actually get little notification papers. So when I say they get notified 5 days ahead of time for fumigations, I'm not talking about all the teachers get a text alert. I'm talking about they get a little piece of paper in front of the school that nobody reads that says, oh, there's going to be a fumigation at this time, this many feet away from your school. And so as we're fighting for more schools to get that right, get that notification, we also want to be making sure that it's not just a little piece of paper.
And as children and grandchildren who are in Sacramento County, every school child for years has been given a little handout. This is the date this spraying is going to happen. Be aware if your child needs to stay home from school, sign this paper and send it. For years. She was totally mystified why this county doesn't do it.
We're going to have to research that more and bring that to the county administrator. That is amazing.
What county is it?
What?
Sacramento. That's awesome. And then, in addition to, one thing that we were really concerned about with this quarter-mile buffer zone for the most drift-prone applications of pesticides, some pesticides are applied through what they didn't consider to be drift-prone application types or application methods, but they're still very, very dangerous, drift-prone, persistent chemicals, such as chlorpyrifos. So we are really interested in getting a 1 mile full-time buffer zone for chlorpyrifos around schools. And the reason that we're fighting for all of this at the county level is the county ag commissioner has the authority. He denied he did for a very, very long time, but the county ag commissioner has the authority to restrict pesticide use around schools. So this is a very possible fight. Any comments, questions before I move on to what we've been doing at the local level to achieve these goals? Really quick,
I just want to say that
really quick.
we used to have a posting sign at the city parks and at the schools for Roundup over 20 years ago, thanks to CRLA. Yeah, the city of Salinas did it for all the city parks, and for they were also going to be doing it at the schools. When we thought we won the thing, we let it go, right? We all go on with our lives, and guess what? It stopped, just because we weren't on top of it. And this is the kind of stuff they do, repeatedly.
Is there a way to create some kind of an informational kind of flyer to give to a principal to let them know, this is the new rule and these are the things that you'll be having access to or you should be notified? Because I'm pretty sure they haven't gotten a tutorial on this or maybe presenting to school boards or having in the agendas of school boards being able to say like, okay, let me inform you of your new right to know, these are the links you should be able to use or.
Yeah, later in our agenda, we're going to be talking about how we can present to teacher groups, school boards, PTAs, micronet groups, all that to inform them on the school regs. I know that the DPR made a fact sheet that says school administrators are going to receive a list and there's going to be this buffer zone. I don't know how widespread they're distributing that, and I don't know what the county ag commissioner's involvement in distributing that is, but actually I just talked to a UCSC intern for SAS, and she's going to be making a fact sheet to give to parents and teachers and people at schools that say these are the school regs, and this is how we can improve upon them, and we're SAS and we're here to help basically.
Because I'm wondering, let's say, here's my school, Everett Alvarez High School. Okay, so if I do 1/4 of a mile, where do I get my listing of these are the growers in your 1/4 of a mile that you should be having contact with and build relationships? with to be able to know, like, hey, you know, just by the way, you know, we work here and, you know, just letting you know, welcome to the new regulation and, you know, but so that each school district, you know, or each school site has access to something where that they could get that link of what's your 1/4 of a mile, you know, is there something where we go to and we link up and we see all the list of growers?
Yeah, well, I think that in the past, what people at school sites have done is actually submit a Freedom of Information Act request to the Ag Commissioner and say, please send me a list of all growers within this distance of me. In Watsonville, the Ag Commissioner, it was Monterey County, but a Watsonville school actually made the teacher that requested that draw her own map and like make the mile circle around it so that they could then go and find the growers in it, which was completely ridiculous. But my understanding is that this password protected website that one school site administrator is going to have access to, they actually will go and see the boundaries, the 1/4 mile boundary around their school, and will actually have access to change it. But I think like quick action that can be taken is schools can submit a Freedom of Information Act request to the Ag Commissioner whenever and say, we want to know what growers are within a 1/4 mile of our school, and they have to do that for you, and they have in the past.
So can we create like a template to be able to then, like, you know, oh, you know, here's a template you can use, so that way we can make that available to principals or school officials that create a template?
And does it have to come from the school? Can it come from the teacher groups that work within the schools?
It can come from
Anybody?
I'm sure that like literally we could go and ask someone on the street, like, submit this Freedom of Information Act request for a 1/4 mile around Sherwood, and they could get it. Yeah.
Well, in the draft regulations that they put out, I don't have the final one, but they include in the final version, it says something effective. Pesticide to be used was not included in the annual notification as specified in subsection blank blank. The operator of the property shall provide this information to the school site commissioner at least 48 hours prior to the application.
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that is included in it. So they have to submit this long list of pesticides, but if there's one that they weren't expecting that they have to use, they have to notify the school 48 hours ahead of time. So we know that they have that ability to notify schools 48 hours ahead of time for pesticide applications. So that only, magnifies our push for them to actually do it instead of just hold it off and think there's an extra pesticide added.
And in fact, we know they can do that. It's all set up to do that, and they do it with the maps that Anna was describing. That is, with this 48-hour notice, they have to show on this 1/4 mile zoned map around the school map where the application is going to be. So this is what we had hoped we could get for the public, and the Ag Commissioner was like going, oh my God, no, we don't have that kind of technology or money. Turns out, yeah, for every school that has a farm, a field within a 1/4 mile of it, there now exists a map that they're going to need to use in these kind of what we call emergencies. So it's there, it's done, it's ready. They just won't let us see it right now. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom through the rest of our local news. I do have a video that I really want to show you all, and then I did tell Omar that he could get a couple of minutes to talk about what he's working on as well. So basically, with our knowledge that the Ag Commissioners can restrict certain pesticide use around schools, and the really disappointing news that not only did the federal government decide to reverse, not only did the EPA under Trump decide to reverse this ban on chlorpyrifos that their own scientists said what needed to happen, but the DPR didn't think that all that science was enough either, and they, in a tactic to just push off their decision, said, well, actually we need to look at the science one more time. We said, well, what can we do at the local level? Is there anything we can do to get chlorpyrifos use restricted at the local level? So both from Santa Cruz County and Monterey County, we wrote a letter to the respective Ag Commissioners saying, you know, it's your responsibility to protect public health at the local level. You've said that, and we really need you to do this when our state and federal government has failed us. We need a 1 mile full-time buffer zone for chlorpyrifos around schools. And we want to meet with you to talk about this. And the Santa Cruz County Ag Commissioner responded pretty much right away. I think the same day that we sent the letter with, you know, all the signatures of the SAS members that could sign it, and said, yes, I'd be happy to meet with you. I don't think anyone in the room was at that meeting because they were from Santa Cruz County. But basically what he said was, I can't do a full mile buffer zone. I can't tell growers what they can't use. And we said, well, actually you can. And basically he was putting up a front, and he was putting up a fight, and he didn't want to agree to anything at that moment. But he ended out the meeting saying, and let me backtrack a little bit. When the DPR said we need to do more science, we're going to send this to scientists to look at, they did submit or send out what they called interim mitigation permit conditions. So they sent out to the ag commissioners, we're looking at the science on chlorpyrifos, and it might not be as safe as we once thought. So in the meantime, you know, while we're figuring it out, you should, and these are optional for ag commissioners to adopt. They don't have to if they don't want to. The DPR said you should instate up to a 500-foot buffer zone around sensitive sites for chlorpyrifos. The problem is in Monterey County there's already a 500-foot buffer zone for chlorpyrifos. 500 feet is nowhere near enough for chlorpyrifos protection. We have we used to have an air monitor at the Salinas airport that was over a mile from chlorpyrifos applications the year that it picked up air concentration of 3 times the EPA determined safe level of chlorpyrifos. So 500 feet is nothing. We went to the ag commissioner saying, you have an opportunity to take action on this. Not only do you have the authority, but now the DPR is putting this in your lap. They're saying you should make this protection, and ag commissioners can increase the restrictions on top of that if they want to. So we went to him saying, you have this opportunity, and what he said was, well, we are looking at it, and we might end up taking additional restriction or putting additional restrictions in the permit conditions because it might be harmful to human health. And so we are looking forward to hearing back from him when he makes those. We've been bothering him every month because he consistently says it's going to be done by the end of the month. So on February 1st, we'll be checking back in with him to see if they decided anything on the permit conditions. Monterey County, on the other hand, and I think that we met with 7 SAS members, or 8 SAS members, including myself with the Santa Cruz County Ag Commissioner. Monterey County, on the other hand, when I sent them the letter and requested that they meet with a group of SAS members, I know that plenty of people signed up to be at that meeting. Well, it hasn't happened yet because the interim Ag Commissioner said, well, I think that the DPR should probably be there when we talk, and actually I think that I should meet with you ahead of time to establish ground rules, and I don't think we can meet with community members right now. So just to give you an idea of what our Monterey County Ag Commissioner is like. And so after a while I let him know, it's really important for community members to be there. I am not SAS, we're all SAS, and I'm happy to talk about ground rules ahead of time, but I think the actual meeting should include the community members. And he said, and I mentioned, you've met with Cesar Lara before, you've met with other people, and he latched on to Cesar and was like, okay, I'll meet with you and Cesar. And so that's as far as we've been able to get with him. We haven't actually worked out a meeting time yet, so that's TBD. But I wanted to update you on the situation. And again, that's meeting with the Ag Commissioner to ask what additional restrictions are they going to be putting on chlorpyrifos.
Sounds like he's afraid of us.
Yes, I would say definitely.
You want to meet with Juan?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's why he's willing to work with Cesar, precisely. And that's why he wants Cesar, because they're the ones that produced the 14-mile buffer, knowing we already had it. And this is giving us something back we had, and we could pound our chest, hey, look how great we are. What do we do? Just got back but we showed you gotta respect us. A bunch of positive stuff happened. I mean, I bring it up because it just irks me to know that we fell into that. That's what come, these committees are so important when you talk to those guys. They have to know there's gonna be pushback. And they have to know that there's people there that are not gonna be negotiating. There's nothing to negotiate. We're talking hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars being lost in health benefits through the state of California and lives. And we're here negotiating? There's nothing to negotiate. You guys are contaminating us. And then you gotta come in with a hardball, right? And then play it out. See what you get, a quarter mile.
Did it end with just him and Cesar and you?
We haven't met yet, so that's the thing. We're trying, it looks like it might be 2 weeks from now, but we're figuring it out.
And his name, I'm sorry.
So the interim ag commissioner, his name is Bob Roach.
And he's been present at everything that Laura said he's been present at.
Yeah.
When I'm in town.
So he's been the assistant ag commissioner for a long time. No, he's heard of us before and he's terrified. I bet that he went to bed that night and had nightmares of all of the SAS members in a room with him yelling at him. I bet that's what he was thinking about.
He's been there for over 20 years.
Yeah.
How long is he going to be interim?
Until they hire a new one, and we're not sure when they're going to start that hiring process.
And that's an appointed position?
Yeah, the board of supervisors appointed.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna blast through the rest of them. I said I was gonna go quickly with it. I got a little bit deep into that one. Okay, so we have been talking for a while. Unfortunately, Dominic Dursa can't be here tonight, but he's like our Democratic Party guy, and he comes to some SAS meetings, and he's always like, guys, we need to be like talking to candidates. We need to be doing this. What are we doing? So I just want to let everyone know one step that we've taken is we've added a pesticide-related question onto a candidate questionnaire that the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council sends out to all the candidates that want their endorsement. So, tiny step, but it's our first step, and I want to make sure that everyone knew that that happened. All right, I mentioned our fight to get Roundup off of school campuses. There's a group called Project Pollinate in Santa Cruz that is working on taking a different approach and working directly with the city to get Roundup banned in the city. And they actually successfully passed a 6-month pilot project with the city of Santa Cruz that will stop the use of Roundup by city employees and contractors and reevaluate the city's integrated pest management policy to take out pesticides that are toxic to human health. So that's a great success. I'm going to skip over the strawberry field next to Ohlone Elementary going organic until the end because there's a video with it and I think it would be a good transitioning point. We had, like Anna mentioned, there were 2 drift incidents that occurred in the Monterey Bay area, one in Salinas and then one in Watsonville back in June of 2016. Altogether, over 24 agricultural employees were hospitalized and sickened by pesticides that drifted. In one case, it was on the field of the same grower, and it had been applied, earlier the day before, and then the farm workers came early the next morning, and they hadn't even gotten out of their bus before they started feeling symptoms of pesticide exposure because an adjacent field to the one that they were going to work on had pesticides applied the night before. And unfortunately, we don't actually know yet what pesticide poisoned them because there were so many different pesticides applied that they haven't yet pinpointed which one made them sick. And the ag commissioners and the Watsonville incident was similar, but I believe it was a different grower's field and the growers didn't communicate with each other and the farm workers were actually out there working when the pesticide drifted onto them. And this really, highlights the need for there to be postings and notification where growers can actually be looking and communicating with each other. But so far, the ag commissioners in Santa Cruz nor Monterey County have not completed those drift investigations. There is a good article on page 34 that mentions a drift incident that happened in Bakersfield, which the investigation has concluded, and chlorpyrifos was one of the pesticides that they were exposed to. And at the very end, it does mention the 2 incidents in the Monterey Bay that occurred. Yeah, Mark?
Just again, quickly, we talk
a lot about the importance of using science and having policy based on science and things like that. But here's a way that the science gets distorted by the bureaucratic procedure. So for instance, Lucia was just talking about how the Ag Commissioner's office is saying, well, we don't know which pesticide poisoned the workers, when it could be the pesticide soup that poisoned the workers. It could be the synergistic interaction of the pesticides that poison the workers, but they don't even explore that. They are specifically trying to name one pesticide or two, in each case. And that, is that scientific? No, that's based on the bureaucratic procedure. That's not based on what the scientists believe actually happens. So it's just kind of strange that we need to address.
I have an answer for you. You get all those chemicals that they claim they sprayed, put them together and say that's what poisoned them. Period.
Yeah.
No, that's what poisoned them. And let them defend. But the other thing too is that these guys, the medical clinics, because they took them to Workwell Medical Group here in Salinas. They took them there, and Workwell did not report it to the state of California. And it has all these contaminations have to be reported to a collection base in Sacramento throughout the state of California. Throughout the entire state, every contamination needs to be reported there. I talked to Bill Monning about it, and he says, yeah, that's right, I remember. So where do we go in the state of California to find out where all the toxicity reports are at? Don't exist, that he knows.
Well, if it's the law to report it, then the CRLA should be involved.
CRLA was involved with that when we did the posting sign, and that was part of the agreement with those guys up in the legislative office in Sacramento. Yeah, they have the information there. We have it in newspapers as well. Bill would know, but we just haven't had the time to sit down and say, they just stopped doing it.
I think according to the law, it's a $250 fine for the physician if they don't report the pesticide. So, I think that's important for them to understand that, but also I think just informing healthcare providers is really important, because it might not just be the $250 fine that's gonna, change their behavior, but also a lot of outreach. I know a lot of the Monterey County Health Department clinics serve a lot of the same people that are affected by exactly what we're talking about, and that might be a good place to start if there was a desire to do some outreach around mandatory reporting.
Well, it's a big deal, because when people get sick, they don't tell the person living next door that they got sick. They're just sick, right? So now you get cancer clusters, as we did in the 80s and 90s. That's what prompted all this stuff. Then it was figured out, man, you got neighborhoods that are sick. You got sections of town. All of them have the same problem. Why? Oh. That's how you figure it out. But if you don't know, you can't point it.
How would
You can't
we
point it.
organize
All right,
that?
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna step in
Sorry, I'm
because
sorry.
we are 20
Yeah.
minutes past our agenda on it. Do you have like 10 seconds?
I was very frustrated when we went to Sacramento and not being able to work with the families in Watsonville and in Santa Cruz in terms of setting up some kind of network, because I kept on thinking, like, did they get any kind of support? Like, what's the network there to provide that support? And so that's a missing link that needs to be developed by this group, I think. Because when we're out there talking about pesticide reform, how do we keep that information and access to like this, the resources of, this is what you need to do so you don't bring this into your house, but at the same time, if it does happen, we need to be the source where that information comes to us, so we can use it when we're out there lobbying and, pushing, where we could get, those family members to come up and say, I was the person that was out there in the field, and this is what happened to me, and then provide them resources, legal support, like create something. It has to be done.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm trying to rush through this part is because there is a discussion that I wanted to have, and I don't think we're going to have enough time to actually fully talk through it, but I did want to talk about some sort of community reporting network that we could be a part of creating, and that has been something that has come up multiple times in the SAS meeting, so hopefully we'll get to that and be able to talk about it. Does that sound good? Good. And then really quick on media, we have had a bunch of media since we last met in November. We had the Cal Health Report article that talked about the new school regs that Francisco from PVFT, Powder Valley Federation of Teachers, and Mark were quoted in. Jennifer Kahn and Karen Cameron. Jennifer's from the Watsonville group, Karen's from the Salinas group. She's not here tonight. They both had letters in their respective newspapers that were responding to an op-ed that 2 Watsonville teachers had written about chlorpyrifos use near their schools. So those are on page 36. Our very own Carol got a letter into the Monterey Herald following the chlorpyrifos listing. And that's a really good one, so see that on page 37. And then Francisco and Casimira, both part of the Watsonville group, were quoted in a California teacher publication. That's the publication of California Federation of Teachers, talking about these school regs and all the work that went into it and all the community organizing that went into that. So that's on page 38, really good read. And then Dr. Ann Lopez, who also shows up to our Watsonville meetings, was interviewed on a radio show called Flashpoints, and that also got published in a Consortium News article, which is on page 39. And that's just talking about a whole bunch of things, including chlorpyrifos and Roundup and harms to farm workers, and it's definitely worth a read. And then I'm going to go ahead and set up a video where Melissa Dennis, one of our Watsonville members, is featured in really quick about a field right next to her school going organic. And while I set that up, I would love for Omar to talk a couple minutes about what he's working on and how he can help.
Oh, can I quickly just say something that I got an email today, just before you say this? Claudia Melendez Salinas is leaving the Herald, and she is looking for some other things to do. And I know there's an article on page 13 about it, but, you know, you just want, she's a resource, she's a writer, she's very knowledgeable about the area, and I just wanted to say that.
I saw that she is becoming a spokesperson for Alisal Union School District. So
Yes.
there might be a way that she can help us.
She's
better.
been kept the rest of that.
All right, go for it.
Hello everyone, good evening, night, something like that. I'm Omar, I'm working with the Romero Institute, specifically with their Green Power project. We're focusing right now on Monterey Bay Community Power, because I'm assuming some of you might know about Monterey Bay Community Power. Who doesn't? Just so I can give a kind of quick. All right. Monterey Bay Community Power is a joint powers agency that's set up between the Tri-County area, Santa Cruz, San Benito, Monterey County, to procure hopefully 100% carbon-free energy for the commercial, industrial, ag, and residential ratepayers of the Tri-County area. There was a big grassroots support and fight to get this passed and established since 2013. They're going online in March. Actually, everything's set to go. March they'll be rolling out the commercial industry and ag clients, and then in July they'll be rolling out into the residential ratepayers. And so my job as the organizer for Romero is to kind of continue that grassroots support. There was such a strong grassroots support with the help of Juan and a few others. They pushed it through. They got the support. They showed that the community was really interested in this type of project. And so what we're organizing behind now is to make sure that Monterey Bay Community Power does have a community aspect to its agency. Currently, it is a JPA run by 2 governing boards. One board is an elected official board, and the other is an operational board. And then there's a CEO and an agency staff and whatnot. And currently, there is no avenue for community input or any kind of community input on direction on how this allotment of billions of dollars of procurement money is going to go. And who's going to be purchasing it, where we're going to get the energy, what type of energy the portfolio will go. And so we're trying to make sure that MBCP knows that the community wants a really robust and diverse advisory council that represents the community. The diversity in all its beautiful shades can be represented, has an avenue to have that really meaningful dialogue with the agency and the community. And so we're
At the moment, we're looking for a really big push Saturday. Saturday's a little too soon. We have some stuff going on there. There's a workshop with MBCP and the policy and operations board where they will be discussing this topic of an advisory council. MBCP is looking to have a really short-term, small stakeholders group or community group that's going to be established. It will be sunsetting in about 6 months, and then a key stakeholders group that will be ongoing and long-term. We just found out that will be made up of commercial, ag, and industries, basically the big industries in this area. And the community group is actually sunsets in 6 months, so it's kind of odd that they're doing it that way. We have a proposal that will be hopefully discussed on Saturday, but we're looking for help and support and solidarity in our policy vote that will hopefully be happening in March. So if I will stick around for a little bit, I'll leave my card, and if you guys want to know a little bit more and see how you guys can help and get involved and really help get this this really robust community advisory board established, I'll be around. Let me know.
Great. And when we go to our upcoming events at the very end of the meeting, I'll put that March 7th meeting on.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to play this awesome video. I won't even give a backstory to it because it talks about it in the video, but I do want to mention that it is about 5 minutes until the meeting is supposed to close. So folks definitely can feel free to leave. Don't feel guilty if you need to go. But I want to ask if people are okay with us going till 8:30, because I think that we can get the rest of the agenda in by 8:30.
I make a motion that we stick around till 8:30, get it done.
Okay,
Right.
thanks guys.
Thank you. Second.
So, I have the video playing on my phone and connected to Bluetooth so we can all hear it, but you will see the video playing from my computer, so I'm going to try and get this timing exactly right. Okay. No.
Is it on now?
Yeah, the video just okay, we're gonna listen to it from my computer.
I got involved with the issue of pesticides near schools when I started noticing a lot of my students struggling with different types of learning difficulties that we really couldn't figure out. There's a lot of students also struggling with health issues like asthma, and seeming to be a higher percentage of students that have suffered from different types of cancer. It's a topic of conversation that's come up a lot between myself and my colleagues at lunch, around the lunch table. My name is Melissa Dennis, and I am a teacher at Ohlone Elementary School. We are a school located in the north end of Monterey County. We're surrounded by strawberry fields, and we have students here who, to the teachers, are obviously in need of special ed services, but they are not receiving special ed services because there's a process that you have to go to receive special ed services, and that takes time and energy and manpower, and there's not enough for the vast quantity of students that are needing it. You almost have to be a detective to figure out what it is that the student is struggling with. It was absolutely ecstatically received welcome news by all the staff and parents to learn that the closest field directly across the street from our school, instead of growing using really dangerous fumigants, the strawberries are now going to be grown using organic methods. So that's going to give us a huge buffer zone right there of fresh air. We're actually going to go on a field trip. he's invited students from our school to go and plant strawberry plants in his organic field. And some of the students have asked that question, why are you going organic? So we're going to be having the students ask the farmer that question. And I look forward to hearing why it is that he's decided to go organic. From what I've heard, it's not easy to go organic because of issues like a lot of the farmers are leasing land. And when you're leasing land, you're paying for it every year, but to go organic, you have to let a field go fallow for 3 years before you can begin. So it'd be almost like paying rent for property that you can't use to make any money. So it's not cost effective. Many of my students come from families who've migrated here from Mexico, and a lot of parents are concerned because they work in the fields, and they've been told that when they get home, they're not supposed to hug their children or touch their children. They're supposed to take off their clothes, take a shower, put their clothes in a hamper that's separate from the other laundry, and they're supposed to wash it separately. They understand how dangerous these chemicals are.
All right, so this video project was done by Joan Kusick, and she's actually been the photographer at our past 2 days of action in Sacramento and produced those like really great photos for us. She's looking for like more people to follow her around like she did with Melissa, so if you're interested in having Joan kind of follow you around for a day and talk about pesticide use and stuff, let me know and I will connect you to. She's still looking for people to connect. Okay, how do you guys feel about that? Hopeful. Yeah, those are beautiful photos. Okay, now we're going to move on to our next steps portion of the meeting. And the first part, we've talked about our school regulations and how more people need to know about what these regulations are and what the holes in them are and how we can come together as a community to advocate not only at the county level but at the state level for improvements. And so one big part of this is just making presentations to groups of parents, groups of teachers, all the way up to school boards. Have some migrant ed parent meetings on the agenda in the Watsonville area. And some folks have volunteered to, get presentations at their groups or groups that they know of. And I don't have any of those written down right now. So if you committed to something in the past, help me by committing again. And are there any groups that we know of that we can be giving presentations to? I'm going to write down SETC, Salinas Elementary Teachers Council, right off the bat because Oscar is working with me on that. I hope your negotiations are going well. So one of them is the site reps meeting where there's a bunch of teachers that are part of the Salinas Elementary Teachers Council meeting, and that's TBD with Oscar. Anybody else have ideas of groups that we can be presenting to?
Well, the Alvarez faculty center.
Yeah, I like you guys. And Anna, will you help me set that up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Mark?
I can do the same thing for La Paz.
La Paz? Awesome.
And I'll explore also just the entire Salinas Unified School District Awesome. School board.
Yeah, so I just started at Robin Meadows, and I live in Grand White Steelers, so like principals and stuff.
Congratulations.
Good job, right?
Other hands.
The MLK Academy for parents.
Can you help with that?
I think Josh volunteered.
For Alisal?
Yeah.
Okay. Volunteering Josh.
All right, Josh.
Anybody else? Any other groups? Parents, teachers? One.
Yeah, when we did the previous effort, what, 2 years ago, the Monterey County Office of Education provided us pictures with all the schools that have fields around. You involved with that effort?
That was before my time.
Nancy Katowski, you guys know Nancy Katowski. She gave us a bunch of pictures, you remember, a bunch of pictures, and we did this big campaign, and it was about spraying around schools, and so we have all these pictures. So we know what the schools are. If you go to that school and just get parents and form a committee, aside from this, and form a committee of parents who can say, I'm from this school, I'm from this school, I'm from this school, I'm from this school, then we have a little picture about how they're surrounded, and they speak on behalf of the concern. And we do that throughout the county. That way we get 10, 15 individual parents supported by these guys. These guys support the parents. They're not speaking on behalf of the parents because they're a group. Then from there you're going to cultivate the parent support. And that's really where I'm going with it. But if you target the ones that we know we can make a point at, because there's no sense of going through Salinas High School. It's right in the middle of town. We could. But the real point is go to those schools that are on the edges, target them, get one parent, say, I represent this school district, and we can go that throughout the whole valley and get 20 people real fast. And they only need whenever we need them to. They don't have to meet as consistent as we are as activists, but they're parents. You know, they're concerned in that sense, right?
I think that's the goal with these presentations, is to get, you know, parents, especially because that's where we're really lacking on our involvement in Safe Active Schools in our work, but get parents, get teachers, you know, not only let them know what the school regs are and hear their experiences, but also get them involved in the activism that we're doing. Yeah, that's the big goal. Steve?
How about the school districts?
Yes.
It seems, you know, we inform them what, you know, all they care about is test scores pretty much, but we inform them that this is hurting the kids, they have to be, you're going to be absent more often and stuff like that. Maybe.
You mean school boards?
School boards, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the goal is that eventually we can be bringing this big effort to a school board meeting and saying, these are the school regs and we're calling on, you know, the ag commissioner or your school board to do ABC. So if people have connections with school boards, we can start exploring those too.
Well, this is an idea you may want to just think about a while, but I was a farm guide for a number of years for Farm Day, and I just got this in the mail today, Monterey County Agriculture Education Group. And you know, a group of teachers and some service learners could go speak to the board and say, we'd like to have a table at Farm Day. And there are a lot of different people there, because I think SAS should have a table there, and you can tell, because they have all of these sort of optional things that the third graders do, and the parents that are the chaperones, so it's not just the little kids and the teachers there, it's the parents too that are going to Farm Day, and so there's really an educational opportunity.
Yeah.
I know it's really slanted ag business, believe me, I'm aware of that, but it's still an opening, I think.
Yeah, if in any way that you could help us get a table at that event, that would be great.
Well,
We could
I
talk
think that if a
more
group
about
of people went to a board meeting, said, we'd like to be on the agenda, we have a proposal, and this doesn't have to be this year, because I think it's sort of like the next Farm Day is already coming up, well, February 1st, March 1st, and then Salinas is in November, though, so that is at the Rodeo Fairgrounds, but it's, you know, it's an opportunity.
wonder how we'll see.
The California Department of Education, like presenting something right now, they just created new frameworks and it calls for civic engagement and civic action. So getting them to meet with SAS to talk about how do you inform all your school districts, how do you inform your, you know, we're going straight to the California Department of Education. And kind of already creating something. I would say, you know, kind of like how she has a pamphlet, but a packet of things where this is what we can, you know, provide school districts, you know, include in there the IPM, how, you know, request those reports, but how do you inform your school districts about the new reg?
And I think also that CPR, new bilingual pamphlets, the two of them, real quick, real easy, and very attractive.
Great outreach tools, right?
How would it be presented at the MCOE? Would bring some pamphlets and have an appointment with Nancy Katowski? I mean, what's the vision?
I would say going in there and saying something like, how can we help your school district better inform your local sites about these new reg and how do you use the system? Like, you know, going in there and teaching them how to, you know, look and see how the air monitors detect certain levels. How can you go in there and look for your city, look for your school? So teaching them the tools as well as teaching them about, you know, how to access, once you get your code, how do you access that information and you can see it at the same time.
But they haven't even given us that code yet, right?
Oh, no, I'm not the first person that they're gonna hand that.
But what I'm saying is, the California Department of Education
Oh,
will
boy.
help them in their process, since this is Safe Act Safe Schools, and what's the information that a principal would need to know. And like, for me, I'm thinking as a you know, a resident of Salinas, as, you know, I have my sons at Everett Alvarez High School, and we have events on Saturday. How dare the school open up on a Saturday when the field's being sprayed, and then we get, you know, that school should be closed. So now, who am I gonna hold liable when we're, you know, being exposed to things? So like, that's my understanding is, as the school districts, they don't wanna be notifying us, because that's what MCOE got out there and spoke to a spokesperson. If you don't wanna be notified, then don't you dare open up your school district or your school site, because they're cashing in on money. When those facilities are exposed, then they're liable.
Well, I think the only follow-up I have on that is the woman actually who went to the December 1st hearing that the DPR put on in Salinas for their school regs. The woman who spoke, her name is Dr. Deneen Gus, and she's actually running to take Nancy Kukowski's spot, and she's interested in meeting with us. And so I'm working with David Kong, who's connected to her because he works at MCOE, working with him to invite her to a meeting.
David Kong or Kong?
Kong.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for that. All right, I think that this is a great list. And how this works when you commit to something, I'll put it in the notes and then I'll also follow up with you individually to see where the progress has gone.
Yeah, I just want to say, Nancy Kukowski, the Office of Education, helped us with methylbromide. I couldn't remember the name of it, but it was methylbromide. And so she supported us, and the entire county banned because she supported us. So, yeah, if we have someone who is on our side versus her who wasn't, but yes, she supported us anyway, it'd be great if we had somebody on our side doing that.
But the superintendent of Santa Rita isn't on our side. That's the superintendent from Santa Rita doesn't believe that pesticides, the parents aren't really concerned. That was published in your last handout. Yeah, that you had a handout in which the superintendent was saying the parents aren't complaining and we don't have any problems in Santa Rita with any pesticides.
But that's
Luckily, we have some teachers on the ground that are fighting for it, so, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a school district that took in SROs when everybody else in this area denied the SROs. So there's something wrong there.
All right, thank you everyone. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. I did not include this in the agenda, but before we speak about possible community reporting or notification network, I think this is a very key piece in it. Carol mentioned it earlier. This is the community response guide, what to do in case of pesticide exposure that the statewide CPR coalition has created. It's a smaller pocket guide version of a big calendar that we used to have, and of course it's all updated. I'm passing out English versions, but I have way more Spanish versions than I do English versions because, as you might start seeing, this is a really important, this is a really important document for anyone working in ag to have. And so I want to give each of you a copy and we can just really briefly look through it. I think it's extremely useful, and this can also be used as an outreach tool, you know, in addition to going to schools or groups just in general to talk about these new school rules. This is something that we can be presenting and that we are already planning on presenting to some migrant parent groups. So at this point, I'd like everyone to just look through it really briefly. We start off with, what is a pesticide? Why are they dangerous? What is pesticide drift? Can I feel, see, smell, taste drift? These basic questions, and then symptoms of pesticide exposure. What is somebody's rights? What are somebody's rights in reporting this? Where are you at risk for pesticide drift? What to do specifically if you're exposed to pesticides at work, at home, or wherever you're exposed. It talks about steps you can take when you see a doctor, and then how to report pesticide exposure. And I think it's important to communicate the importance of reporting pesticide exposure, because that is a large fear. And what I've heard is that, why would I report something and put myself at risk when nothing is ever really going to come of it? But if we can start, letting folks know you have a right to report this. It's illegal for your employer to fire you for reporting this. And if more people continue to report pesticide exposure, then we'll be able to have a stronger case, and the state won't come out every year and say, oh, nobody got poisoned, everything's fine. Yeah, Steve, really quick.
That was on page 6, know your rights. First one, pesticide exposure is illegal. If other people expose you to pesticide, they are breaking the law.
Yes.
So that should be where people live too, not just the schools, because if they just can't do it on school days, lots of those kids live a block or 2 blocks from that school on the weekend, so they're still going to be exposed.
Oh yeah.
So is everybody else, and that it says pesticide exposure is illegal. If other people expose you to pesticide, they are breaking the law, and that should be enough.
Yes, I agree. All right, so now that we've gotten a chance to look at this really quickly, and one point that I didn't mention is it has a guide on who to call. This guide is specific to the Central Coast, so Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, Ventura counties, who to call, if it's business hours, if it's a weekend or an evening, and what the county health officer number is also. Just a lot of numbers and really specific information that isn't really found anywhere else in one compiled document. So who needs to have this guide, and how can we begin to distribute this into the community? This is going to be unfortunately short conversation, but we will pick it up at the next task meeting. Shrieks?
Oh, if we can pursue our lead with the churches and the labor camps, I'd be up for that.
Awesome. So the Diocese of Monterey County, Charisse and I met with him and said, this is all of our work, this is what we do. And he said, well, I have a perfect opportunity for you. We have migrant groups, and we go out to the migrant camps all the time and always provide material, and this would be a perfect addition, and you could present to them and talk with them and share this. So I've been waiting for these because I'm so excited to start that. So thanks for bringing that up, Charisse.
I like that it has the physicians must report suspected pesticide illness at the back, so that this also could be, you can go to the clinics and they'll work well, meet with the office manager.
So clinics.
Oh, we do need education. I work in the ER, we didn't know what was going on. So, yeah, we need more education with regards to the science.
The county epidemiologist is the one who keeps track of these pesticide events. Is not allowed to keep that. The Ag Commissioner keeps reports of the events.
Okay. So should we give this to them?
I want them to know.
Okay. Aaron.
CRLA here in Salinas has a community board with farm workers and other folks that I think could help us get this out to the wider community.
Can I write you down for that?
What about the health department?
Is the epidemiologist under the county health department?
She is, yeah.
And parents at the schools that are near these farm sites.
Parents.
workers, farm workers, but I don't know what to contact labor unions, specific labor unions, so the ones that bus them out to certain places, so different labor.
You go to Food for Less at 3 a.m. in the morning and set up a
The donut
table.
place right here.
And I think the labor union should include the teachers in this too. The staff should have this.
Yeah.
On parent conference nights or open house. Open house, there's your family, and you could set up a table, because we have tables at all those events at all high schools where all these groups are there, PTAs there, you know, have a table through ASB, you can request a table to have that.
Yeah, I can do the board of supervisors, all of them, and Monty and Stone and Panetta. Panetta's on the agricultural commission, but I mean, the committee, but, or whatever it is, but, you know, people may call one of their supervisors if they have a problem, you never know. I mean, they might say, what do I do? So you never know, it might be Louis Salego might get a call or something. It's just hard to tell.
Be a nice icebreaker.
What about bringing these to the supervisors? Oh, you just wrote that? I'll wake up.
Yeah, this is an amazing booklet. I know it's going to be great in outreach, and I know I'm excited to use it with my clients as well. I just wanted to say that oftentimes it's difficult for folks who have been exposed, particularly farm workers, to speak out, in part because even though retaliation is illegal, oftentimes they have family members that work for the same employer, and it gets tricky with repercussions that might go towards family members. Also, farm workers are often at-will employees, and so when they get a rest during the down season, there's no guarantee that they'll be hired back the following season. And it can be difficult to show that they weren't hired back because they filed the complaint. Complaints can be filed anonymously, that's really important to know when doing outreach. But nonetheless, I think it's important to be sensitive to the concerns that folks might have about filing a complaint. And in every single case, maybe filing a complaint isn't the best way forward. Maybe it is, and I just think it's important to have an honest discussion and being sensitive to those issues.
What about it following up on the fact that the physician, when the drift did happen, didn't report it? And I think that should be followed up. I think, you said that that was not reported, so if this book is going to make any sense or help anybody, we need to, the farm workers themselves, they might feel vulnerable in reporting, but if they see that action is being taken against the mandatory reporters, which are the physicians, then maybe they would be encouraged. So we need to have someone follow that up.
Going back to what you said, Erin, I would love to have you with me or with SAS for maybe our first couple of times that we're presenting this to folks, just so maybe you can mentor it. Anything else? Norma,
I was just wondering, it says, call on page 11, call community support group for help, and SAS is on there. Who is that number for? Is that you specifically, or is that?
That goes to the Google Voice number that I currently have connected to my email. And so if I am not in this position anymore, then the person that is in this position will get that number. But yeah, that's going to be
Homes all along Veranda, homes all along, the corner edges of our communities. I'm just thinking we're Veranda, middle-class population, knocking on doors and just informing the families. I've seen so many times those little drift clouds kind of going over that wall and just escaping on the other side of that person's lawn, and just being able to give them access to where do I report when I get these smells in my backyard? Where do I, that would be like the back, I think the back little areas, maybe they're not working, but they're being exposed to it. And so where do I report? And going, door to door, just like, you do canvassing for politicians, it's going to the east side and informing the families about things. It's going into and getting high school students or organized in clubs, maybe creating clubs on campus, that, you know, community service opportunities for students to not only be informed, but being able to know what to inform the community about health issues and pesticides.
Good one,
Juan and then Aaron.
We have difficulty trying to figure out when they're gonna spray, what they're gonna spray, and the times they're gonna spray. We need to get out there and check out all the scheduling, so be ahead of it. And then we doing this to prove that we're alleging that there's toxicity coming onto the safety areas of our families, right? Either their homes or their schools. I'm assuming here that if we go back the last 4 or 5 years, and you look at the ADA of the schools, and you look at the application of chlorpyrifos and methylbromide and whatever else we want to look at, where, because they all have to be permitted to be sprayed, right? If they have to be permitted to be sprayed, we want to look at those first. Then we want to look at the location of that. Oh, there's a school nearby. And then you look at
Chimacos does.
Yeah, then you look at the ADA of that school and say, if they sprayed it on the 4th of February, what happened by the 10th of February? What happened to the ADA? Was there that flex? And every time they did that, there's a drop in ADA. If we could show that, then there's a direct correlation with the application and ADA going down. Which means, whether we have an air monitor or not, doesn't mean anything. Those kids are what do you call those birds? Parakeets in the mine.
Canaries.
I would use a parakeet, yeah.
Project for grad students.
Yeah.
And now I gotta.
So anyway,
I
that's my
have a
point.
quick one. Aaron and then Sharice.
That's fine, go ahead.
Oh, quick one. Since we're addressing the production side, I wonder if we could also set up tables in like Costco's and the Walmarts and address the consumption side, you know, like encourage, since we're doing this toxicity in the produce, so also encouraging.
Probably not inside, but outside Costco.
Oh, outside, yeah, outside, so encourage, just so that we would encourage organic, buying of organic, and encourage.
Right. But they're selling some of those chemicals right there.
They'll pick you out, but I mean, you can get I've seen like Greenpeace volunteers that are out there for quite a long time, so I'm sure it's easier doing it right Aaron and then Steve, really quick, we have 5 minutes until 8:30.
I'll keep it really brief. I just wanted to address like the health clinics and healthcare side of things. It seems like what this is particularly great for is acute pesticide poisoning, because there is subchronic and chronic, which manifests in different ways and isn't as easily dealt with, I think we're finding. Not like any of this is easily dealt with, but, and then so within the healthcare sphere for acute poisonings, there could be the ER, which is where a farm worker or a community member might go if they're suffering acute symptoms. There's the workers' comp clinics, and then there's the primary care providers. And so there's different tiers of clinics, and each of them might have a different use or even require different materials than this. And so I just think it's important when we think about the healthcare side of it, which is extremely important because it's important to prevent these things, but also really important to ensure when they happen that people receive adequate healthcare, that we make sure we're catering to the different needs that are out there.
Pediatricians are another big group.
Oh, yeah.
It's not all bronchitis.
Steve.
Yeah, just keep going back to this pesticide exposure is illegal. Is there a definition of what is exposure? How close you have to be or something? And as you know, if they use these pesticides and there's nobody within 25 miles of the place, that's probably not exposing to anybody. But is there a definition of what's exposure?
I think it's a time relationship. When was the spray being sprayed? Where was the child or the adult? And then how soon did they have symptoms? Immediate? 10 minutes later? That's what you document when you document somebody coming into the hospital.
Yeah, and of course proving, right? Proving that there was drift, proving that the person has those pesticides in their body. And the science becomes very, very complicated, right? And it's the right, as Mark is saying, is like how the science or the bureaucracy works to make that very complicated proof. And the DPR will swear that pesticides do not drift to begin with. So that's the whole narrative to begin with. And the whole paradigm around the regulation is that they don't drift. So we are not exposed. So also here, for instance, when you say, if you are exposed to pesticides, again, going back to what Aaron is saying, is only acute poisoning, acute exposure, because, so all that to say that the questions are really good questions, and within this paradigm is no exposure never happens. They don't drift. And the whole system is set up to make it very difficult for you to prove otherwise.
Not in Santa Rita either.
Well, it's how you argue it. I mean, are you sick because of the drift or sick because of the chemical? So drifting can be sick. It was that damn chemical. Period. That's how you argue back. That's craziness coming back. Right? It's the answer coming back.
Okay, we have 1 minute till 8:30, and this whole conversation is going to be put on our next month's agenda. This is what happens when you don't meet for 2 months. Yeah. So much happens, or you need to talk about all of it.
Oh, you're purposely avoiding us. Oh, man.
So with this information and keeping in mind that we will be going to groups and talking about, the importance, but also the risks on reporting. Is there something that we can do as a local coalition to create a sort of network where folks can report to us, or like maybe make like a Facebook feed of photos of pesticide applications that seem sketchy to people? Or is there something that we could create as a coalition that would keep these in one place that we could then use when we're going to Sacramento, when we're talking to the county ag commissioner, and just kind of have for our own use and for the community to really have access to these things that are otherwise not very transparent or get lost in the bureaucracy of reporting pesticide use, etc. What are people's thoughts and feelings on that? Because it's something that's been coming up in past meetings, especially when we were talking earlier about the pilot notification project that's happening at those 3 schools in Monterey County. They'll be receiving notification for pesticide applications around them, but that leaves all the rest of Monterey County still not receiving notice. What are your thoughts on that? Charisse was a thought leader on this, so I'd appreciate your input. And then Anna, you had your hand up.
Creating an app. I run on apps, but creating an app where, if I'm right now exposed, I'm able to report. If I saw something, as I was going through the road, I'm able to report at any time. If I want to know where the meetings are at today, or if I want to know, I want to go directly and report it to the Department of Pesticide Regulation. I go through your app and I'm able to go directly there and report it there. Report it to the EPA, the Cal EPA. There's so many different places you can report. And then being able to click on the app to be able to connect with CRLA or the resources that you have linked on the back. Or to see whether this school's being, having any reporting of 5-day notification on pesticides. Let's say I'm in Santa Cruz, is it able to, since those schools are already supposed to be giving the 5-day notification, is there something that I'm able to look at online for my school up in, the Santa Cruz area?
I also remember what a big hit the maps were, and we could put that on an online website form where we could tag where we are and see, oh, there's so many reds in my area. It's an easy way to kind of, for us to identify ourselves and see who else is our neighbors.
And with that map, we were talking about if you could teach us how to use it. Remember?
Yeah.
Crash course again.
Okay. I'll write that down. crash course on the Center for Environmental Health Tracking Program has created a pesticide use mapping tool where you can go and the data isn't current. It's as soon as DPR releases the data, well, then it takes a while to update it. But I think it has 2015 data on it right now, and you can go and zoom in on any location and see the pounds of pesticides applied at the smallest level is a square mile. And then you can also go all the way up to the county level and see, how pesticide use has changed over time, what were the top 10 chemicals applied. You can get so much information from just this map. So we can do another review of it because I think the last time we reviewed it was like when I first took this position. So it was Giselle.
Yes, so with the cosecha study in 2017 over the summer, we actually made a tutorial with the usage map, and it's still under development, but we made a tutorial because the original tutorial is like 20 minutes long, and we figured it's quite boring in our perspective, and the one we made will be much shorter and will be much more efficient and updated. So I can keep you guys updated on how the videos come in.
Cosecha training.
Yeah. All right. These are all really great ideas, and we're going to talk more about it and how we can actually develop these ideas more, and who knows how to make an app? I don't know, but we'll talk more about it. Last comment, Judy.
Well, I just wanted to add, I was thinking of Hartnell Library and CSU Murphy Library having like a little rack thing that would have just this and some other basic little materials that could be there for people to pick up. I mean, most people are getting things on their little devices nowadays, but there are a lot of people, when you're waiting in line somewhere, and you're at a counter, reference desk, there are a lot of places for little materials. They don't have to be big, but something compact like this, just creating a series of very simple informational little things about pesticides and what you're doing, et cetera.
Yes.
Commissioner.
Any last burning comments or ideas for the reporting network?
Sometimes, you look at the reporting information to kind of assess what's happening right now with any kind of development. And so like, let's say, you're gonna build 18,000 brand new homes on Veranda, on that side where the fields are right now. There's schools being built. You have a middle school, you have a high school. But in this area, they've already done studies, but they say that the studies don't warrant any cleanup. But if I go back 2013, 2014, I see the tons of stuff being used here. How do you justify no cleanup? And so that's a big concern that I have, is that there's a lot of development going on right now in this region. You got a new high school, a new middle school, but yet there are no toxic cleanups. And this has happened already before in other areas, like in Alley Unified, they built a whole high school. And it wasn't until after that high school was built that they found it toxic, and it was Belmont High School, and they had to go back and clean it up. And so my biggest fear is that we're building right now schools, and we're gonna start building homes. But these contractors are not doing community cleanup. And we having people live in these homes that are gonna be having to deal with the after effects of living in land that is toxic.
Lester.
We will bring it up next meeting. It was about the whole app thing.
Is it quick?
Well,
I want to write it down so I don't forget.
I volunteered I attended some of the other organization. When they talked about how do we outreach, how do we get people to know about these things, they usually utilize internship for, let's say, computer science majors, or they talk to service learners, people that need hands-on experience with app development. I was just stating that, hey, they just contacted these teachers, like, hey, would you like to just collaborate with them about all that stuff. So I just wanted to put that out there. I've noticed it, I've seen it a couple of times where, hey, if you guys know anyone that's a teacher who has interns and who has students that's willing to put experience on it, because a lot of people don't have experience. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, and then at the next meeting we can start talking like,
okay,
what teachers do we know, or like what
exactly.
service learning organizations can we contact, keep us out to go through something like this. Awesome, so great ideas. We'll talk a lot more about it. Last part of the agenda is upcoming events and how we can get involved in the next month. This Saturday, we have the Women's March at CSUMB where SAS will have a table, and I know that at least 4 people have already said that they can help table. Is there anybody who hasn't committed that is really interested in being part of the tabling opportunity at CSUMB? We have Cassandra, Erica, and then Carol, and then 2 other CSUMB students that aren't here tonight that will all help.
There was something like 3,000 to 4,000 people there last year. They expect more this year.
Yes.
And I'm going to be giving Cassandra the tabling materials for that, and have parking passes for.
Where are the tables set up?
I'm not sure, but I'll send out an email tomorrow with that information.
I think it's kind of an important area.
It's in the soccer field.
Soccer
and
field.
Dominic was going to send out
To the groups, the arrangements for where each group's table is going to be, but
Hopefully that
Our
happens
hasn't
tomorrow.
gotten
Haven't even, okay.
Do we have, are there assigned times, or are we just talking, show up whenever you can for the window?
I'm just gonna show up there, set up, so you guys can come and go ahead.
Okay.
All right, and then I will not be at CSUMB, but I will personally be in Greenfield at Vista Verde Middle School at the South Monterey County Special Ed Institute that's put on by the Grupo Chuparosas down in Salinas, or down in Greenfield, and that is also tomorrow morning from 8 to 1. I know Maida will be there, so I'll put you down, and I'll be there. Is anybody else interested in going down to Greenfield for a Spanish event? No worries, that's okay.
It's be Saturday.
Oh, not tomorrow. I keep thinking today's Friday. Saturday. Okay, great.
Could you send me an email with information about that? I might be able to go.
Yeah, it'll be in the email that I send out with these notes. Great. And then this upcoming Tuesday, January 23rd, school day, so the group that DPR has asked to look at the science of chlorpyrifos is going to be holding a public meeting where they will be asking DPR a lot of questions that we want to be there for because we think that a lot of our questions will be answered and we'll get kind of more insight on what the process for doing this research on chlorpyrifos and where it might end up. So there won't be a chance for public comment. It's going to be like a purely informational meeting for us, but we are planning on doing small delegations or not small delegations, but it's a generally smaller media event than we usually do. We're going to be doing delegations to Cali, PA, and DPR, and Governor Brown delivering the letter that California Pesticide Reform wrote, asking them to suspend the use of chlorpyrifos while they continue their scientific deliberation. So I know that Maida will be there, and I will be there. So we can give Tony, we can give rides from Salinas, Christy. Is anybody else? Aaron
I'll
will
be there, I'll be
Oh,
coming
yeah.
separately.
Yes.
I'll be leaving from Santa Cruz.
Yes. Anybody else interested in going up with us, meeting us there?
Are these the mitigations
In Sacramento,
that they were
California.
promising us?
The mitigations are now in the Agricultural Commissioner's hands, and so that's why we wanted to meet with them. And we got to meet with Santa Cruz, even though he didn't give us too much information, and we still haven't met with Monterey County Ag Commission. This is more to discuss, maybe Mark can explain it better, but I think it's more to discuss like the scientific reasoning behind DPR choosing to do this process rather than ban it.
Yeah, the Department of Pesticide Regulation could have taken action based on what the United States Environmental Protection Agency said, which was, this is horrible stuff, you need to ban it. But instead, our state Department of Pesticide Regulation said, oh, let's hand it off to some scientists to look at again for a year or so. And that's what this panel is. It's a governor-appointed panel, hasn't met in a while, but these are scientists, they're not bureaucrats, and they've been called in to look at the science of chlorpyrifos, the recent stuff, and to question the Department of Pesticide Regulation as to why they've made their the decisions that they've made so far, which are, yeah, if you put a little buffer zone in, chlorpyrifos is okay.
So the whole OEHA decision doesn't.
Our hope is the same science influences this panel of scientists as affected the 8-0 vote of scientists at OEHA. Yes.
There'll be different scientists.
Different scientists, yeah.
Okay.
But that wouldn't even the same material.
We hope so, yes. Okay?
I mean, I don't know, but I don't think it'll be the same material if they have a different person in charge of the committee.
And they have a slightly different, you're right, and they also have a slightly different agenda. They have to look at the different kinds of health effects, but too complicated right now, and I know we're over time, so.
I'll briefly summarize
Yeah.
it. So the OEHA panel that we attended back in November, they were looking at chlorpyrifos as a developmental toxin. They were trying to determine, is it toxic to the reproductive system and the development of human beings? And then this panel is looking at chlorpyrifos, whether or not it's a toxic air contaminant, which is another classification that our bureaucratic government has for chemicals. And so that's why a whole different group of scientists is looking at this, is looking at chlorpyrifos. Yes, it's redundant and it's bureaucratic.
But the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Hopefully, we will still leave that meeting.
Or it falls off.
Like we did with the OEHA. Okay, great. And then one more thing, actually two more because I forgot the March event. February 2nd is the court hearing on T-loan. Mark mentioned that the DPR has been sued for this underground regulation, and there was going to be a court hearing in December, but it got rescheduled to February 2nd. And it's going to be, it was filed in the county of Alameda, so it's going to be at the Alameda County Courthouse, which is in Alameda. So if folks are interested in that, we will also be bringing people there by carpool. Anybody? Aaron, will you be there?
I'll be there. The judge will also likely issue a tentative decision on the 1st that they might still hear the arguments on the 2nd, but you might get a little preview of what he or she might decide. I don't know who the judge is, but in that case.
Great. Anybody else?
Christine.
Yeah, I got Christine. Okay, let me know if.
I'm going there.
Okay, let me know if you find out later that you can make it or decide you want to go. And then the last one, which I don't have written down, is March 7th. There is a community advisory meeting in Watsonville to discuss who the community advisory panel for Monterey Bay Community Power will be, which is what Omar spoke to us about earlier. So that is on March 7th, and it's in Watsonville, and it's in the morning. I believe it's around 9 a.m.
This is very important, guys. They're developing the committee that hears and sees the needs of the community. And we're talking about $25 to $30 million coming in annually from now on. That money is the money that was developed after they created JPA, which is like a nonprofit, Joint Powers Authority with different cities, 19 out of the 21 in the 3 counties. And there's we took the place of the PG&E shareholders. PG&E shareholders for 3 counties, every shareholder. So when you add it up at the end of expenditures, you got $25 to $30 million that would have gone back to the shareholders in the 3 counties. Now it's being put into a bank account here, Monterey Bay Community Power, and the law that passed in 2001 says it has to be used for renewable resources of energy. Renewable resources of energy. And there's a great little documentary. It's Monterey Bay Community Power, the initials, if you can write it down, Monterey Bay Community Power, and then look for
I can link it in the notes.
yeah, link it in, but we put potluck on it because we had a big victory party we're all excited because, hey, that's a lot of money. And we had a victory party, and in there is a video that's a documentary on really great information, a lot of interviews of people, local people here.
Yeah. So if counties were allowed to regulate pesticides, this would kind of be like 3 counties coming together and saying, we're actually going to invest in sustainable agriculture, and the community is going to choose where that goes. And what's happening is that aspect of the community being able to choose is being co-opted by industry, and so that's why the NDCP people are very
We need people
passionate
there,
about
guys,
it.
we need people there.
Yeah, I'm going to be real quick. Next week, I think around the 25th, starting at Silomar Conference Grounds, is the annual Eco Farm Conference. And one of the speakers, this is tied in, is a man named, his last name is Ackerman. He wrote a book, and it was on the radio this morning on Rising Up, Sonali Health, whatever it is. And it's about Mal's, Italy. And it's a village that actually did what you were talking about. They banned all pesticides, and they did it by getting together and bringing in the best minds and toxicologists and lawyers in Europe, and having all of these different things and deciding what their vision would be, what they want, sustainable, agricultural, different marketing things and products. But if you can just Google Rising Up Sonali, and then you can find out. It was this morning on, and he was on the last 10 minutes, but it was very good. And he's written this book.
Judy sent me the link,
Yeah,
so I will.
if you could maybe send it
Yeah,
to
so
somebody.
I will put EcoFarm on the upcoming events, and then link that speaker will be there, and link the radio show.
You can crash the event, it's very expensive.
And let's go ahead and do a quick wrap up for everyone who stuck around. Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and start. Lucia Calderon, really excited to be here with this group. Our next meeting is going to be here. I hope that it wasn't like extremely difficult to find this place, but I hope that everyone got here okay. I think we're going to stick with it because I think it suits our needs a little bit better than the little conference room at the Labor Council. I'll be here February 15th, which is third Thursday of next month. Yeah, thank you all for being here and sticking around. So I'll go to my left. Thank you, Tony.
Good job.
I'm tired. But I'm excited for the Women's March. It was huge last year, so I'm excited to see everybody show up.
Me too. I'm excited for the year and more people coming and from all backgrounds. And so I'm just grateful to be part of this group.
Yeah, me too. Very grateful, very excited. Particularly excited about Procure Foss and seeing where all this goes. So.
I want to add something. I'm going to the Philippines and I'm excited to share with them, and I'm sharing with my friends, like, we can organize, we can make something, like just the idea that I'm seeing here, that we can be a small group, but if we do something creative, we might be able to, we can make a change. So sharing the ideas.
My name's Anna. I'm really excited for everything that's coming up this year and what we're going to be able to do.
My name's Lester. I'm glad I volunteered from where you guys started out from back then to the whole Sacramento Prop 65, so might as well stick around.
Yeah. Thank you. Norma, long day at work, at home, and I was like, oh no, I don't. And every time I come here, I always realize it was a good choice. It's tough to get here. I don't live too far, but it's just the idea of leaving my cozy home to come to another meeting after a really long day. But every time I leave, I'm always glad that I came. So thank you.
I feel the same way. It's always exciting to be here.
And Judy Kios, everybody said what I was going to say, but I just want to add, good meeting. Boy, I really appreciate the way the meetings were conducted here.
And I'll second that. Christy Toronto, I'm glad to be here, and it's so fun to see it moving. It just seems like we just have to keep, the work isn't over, it's just starting.
Hi, I'm Esther, and I'm actually shocked by all of this. I didn't know that reporting pesticide exposure is illegal. I'm like, what? Because most of my uncles are work in the field, and it's like, what? You didn't know this? So yeah.
I'm Wes White. I guess I'm just excited, ecstatic, overwhelmed at all the information that you just keep pouring at this, and the energy that you got and the focus that's been going. You know, I mean, just watching the last year or so, thanks to one. And I mean, geez, we've outgrown our shell, and here we are in a larger space.
I'm just happy to be here. Adelante.
Maybe refill tomorrow.
That's great, all right. It's always a pleasure, everybody. I'm Mark, and I remember when the meetings were short because we didn't have a lot to talk about. Now we have
All right, thank you, everybody. No, in the back?
Two more.
Oh, sorry.
Steve. Okay, I'm Steve, and I'm going to try to talk to some supervisors about this pesticide exposure is illegal. I think if they can understand that, maybe they can ban this stuff in Monterey County.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I can just cut in before, because just the thought of what Steve says, Board of Supervisors, every city council records the meetings. It's aired for the public to see. We have 3 minutes to do a 3-minute commercial on our stuff here. And we tell everybody we could pick whatever we want, 2 or 3 of us behind us, and somebody could read one part, right? And you do your presentation, but you get it out there, and get it out there now, because we still have 4 months before school ends. So let's push it. Every school, every city council, come on.
Aaron, I know it's been a long meeting, but it's been a great meeting. Appreciate all the energy and the ideas and the strategy that people brought here tonight, and let's bring it again next month.
Yeah.
Thank you.